Many years ago, before phones and city noise took over the world, there was a quiet town called Ida, a town ruled by kings, where the river spoke in whispers and traditions carried more weight than gold. It was a peaceful place where people farmed, fished, and lived by the laws of the ancestors. In that town lived a young tailor named Enojo. He was not rich, but his hands were blessed. With his old sewing machine under his zinc shade near the main road, he made clothes that fit people like skin. Every morning, he would walk to his shop. He had no helper, no apprentice. It was just him, his tools, and his dreams. Life was not easy at all for him, but Enojo was a cheerful man. He smiled at everyone, greeted the elders with respect, and always sang old Igala songs while he worked. The villagers loved his gentle spirit, but they often pitied him. Such a good man, they would say. Yet, poverty holds him like a shadow. Just across the road from his shop, there was a yam seller named Omaja. She was a beautiful young woman with bright eyes and skin that glowed under the sun. Every afternoon, when sales were slow, she would cross the road and sit on the low stool beside a Nojo sewing machine. At first, she came just to rest her legs or borrow his small mirror to check her face. But slowly, it became a habit. She would stay, chatting about the market gossip while Enojo sewed quietly, only nodding once in a while. Sometimes she helped him pick pins from the floor or hold fabric as he cut. Sometimes she just sat and watched his fingers dance across the clothes. Her laughter filled the air like the sound of water from a clay pot. Soon, everyone around the vicinity started teasing them. People would pass by and say, Enojo the tailor, are you sewing clothes or sewing love? He would just smile and say, leave me alone, no. All join. Omaja would cover her face and laugh shyly, but her heart already knew the truth. She was in love with him. As days turned into weeks, the friendship grew like young cassava, slowly but strong. Sometimes when rain fell, Enojo would run to her store. They would both stay there, laughing and gisting. At night, he would walk her home. Her mother always thanked him and called him a man with a good heart. But her father was strict and did not like Enojo much because he was poor. But even he could see that this young man was respectful. Enojo and Omaja began to dream together. He told her how he wanted to one day own a big shop with apprentices wearing uniform shirts. She told him she wanted to marry a man who feared God and loved her for who she was. In their small world, they were already husband and wife, but poverty was snapping them back to reality. Enojo earned little, and there were days where hunger visited more than any customer. Still, they stayed close. They shared roasted yam and palm oil. They laughed like people who had all the riches in the world. One quiet evening, when the sun was going down behind the hills, Enojo walked Omaja home. The road was lonely and the sky looked golden. That night, their friendship crossed the line. Love carried them farther than words could explain. It was a night of weather for two, warm hearts, and mistakes that will one day bring tears. Weeks later, Omaja discovered that her belly was growing. Her mother screamed. Her father almost fainted, and the whole village began to whisper. The tailor has brought shame to our household, her parents shouted, but Enojo refused to run away. He came boldly to the house, knelt before her parents and said, I am the one responsible. I will marry her even if it costs me everything. In a gala land, it was an abomination to pay the bride price of a pregnant woman. The elders said such unions angered the gods. The family must first perform the Itu Ejuma, which means the cleansing sacrifice before the talk of marriage could continue. That night, the elders met and fixed a date for the ritual. Enojo went home sweating and shaking. He knew the tradition so well. Every man in Ida grew up hearing those stories. A goat will be pied. You should understand what that means. Its blood will be poured to the earth, and the couple will swear before the gods to remain faithful forever, or the curse of Area will follow. That's the swelling curse that first attacks the legs, then the stomach before it finally takes life. But Enojo didn't care. All he wanted was to be with Omaja. He loved her beyond fear. So, When the elders said the word, he nodded. When they told him to kneel before the shrine, he obeyed. When they mentioned the consequences of an unfaithful wife, he swore with trembling lips, believing love was stronger than tradition. After the cleansing sacrifice, peace returned to the family. Omaja's parents accepted Enojo fully. They told her to follow him home and start her new life as a wife. There was no big ceremony, no crowd, and no long dance, just a quiet meal, a blessing, and two hearts filled with hope. Their first home was a tiny house, but they were happy. In the morning, Enojo would go to his small sewing shed while Omaja cooked, fetched water before resuming her business. Every evening, they sat outside on a wooden bench discussing and laughing. They didn't have money, but they had peace. Soon, their baby boy was born. Chubby, loud, and beautiful. They named him Omaje, meaning my joy has come. Enojo danced around the house like a madman that day. He sang praises in Igala language. Even though he was poor, he shared kola nuts and roasted fish with neighbors. After some weeks, Omaja regained her strength. Enojo worked harder than ever. He wanted to pay the bride price now that tradition allowed it. He saved every kobo he earned from sewing, ate little, and wore the same old shirt for months. When he finally gathered enough, he went to Omaja's father with palm wine, yam, and money. The family elders blessed him. Now, their marriage was complete before man and spirit. That night, Enojo couldn't sleep. He kept staring at his wife and thanking God. He felt proud, not just for marrying her, but for doing it the right way. He told himself that even if he had nothing, love and honesty would feed them. He didn't know that life does not always reward good people immediately. Days became months, and not just tailoring business was steady. People came from nearby villages because they liked how neat his stitches were. But soon, things started to change. The area became crowded with new tailors, and many people began buying ready-made clothes from traders who brought them in from Lokoja and Onitsha. Enojo's income dropped. He worked from morning to night, yet they could barely afford food. Omaja watched him struggle. She could see him count coins, sigh, and still smile at her. At first, she admired his strength, but slowly her admiration turned to frustration. Every woman around her seemed to be living better. Her friend Ene wore gold earrings. Another friend had just bought a new wrapper worth more than Enojo's monthly earning. When they asked her how she was coping with her tailor husband, she smiled and lied. We are doing fine, but deep inside, bitterness was growing. Sometimes, Enojo came home late, tired and empty handed. He would eat without meat and still thank God, but Maja began to nag. Why are you always broke? Why can't you look for a bigger shop? How will your children go to school like this? He didn't fight her. He just kept quiet, believing she would understand one day. He didn't know that love was already turning weak inside her. 2 years went by. They had two more children, twin girls this time. The house became smaller and the problems grew bigger. Omaja stopped smiling often. She spent most of her evenings with other women in the neighborhood, gossiping and comparing lives. When they spoke about men who provided everything, she sat silent but angry. Sometimes she looked at Enojo and saw not her husband, but the reason she was suffering. She forgot the days he carried her yam, forgot how he stood before her angry father, and forgot how he swore before the shrine to love her forever. In her eyes, Enojo was no longer a man. He was a reminder of the life she wanted to escape. One night, Enojo sat outside with his children. They were laughing and chasing fireflies, but Maja didn't join them. She stood at the door watching with her arms folded. Something in her heart was already changing, something cold and dangerous. That same week, a group of traders from the neighboring village came to sew new clothes for the festival. Among them was Ocholi, a tall rich man who sold yam and palm oil in bulk. He spoke softly, laughed when necessary, and carried the aura of a big man wherever he went. When he entered Enojo's shop to take his measurements, Omaja was there to relax as usual. Their eyes met, and that single look planted the seed that would soon grow into poison. Ocholi stretched his arms for measurement while laughing and telling stories about his travels. He talked about his big yam bands and how he supplied to Lokoja and Abuja. Omaja listened carefully. Her eyes followed his smooth skin, his gold chain, and his expensive shoes. For the first time in a long while, she compared what she saw with what she had at home. After taking his measurements, Enojo asked him to come back in a few days for his clothes. Ocholi nodded and dropped extra money on the table, more than what was required. He said, "This is for kola nuts," and then he winked at Omaja before leaving. Her heart skipped, but she quickly looked away. Days later, Ocholi returned to collect his abada. He praised Enoja's work and said it was perfect. Then he turned to Omaja and smiled again. He asked if she helped her husband in the shop every day. She nodded shyly and then pointed at her own shop. He laughed and said, "You are a good woman, and a woman like you deserves fine things." Before leaving, he gave her a small gift and then said, "Please, don't reject it." Enojo thanked him happily, not knowing that Wahala will soon burst. From that day, Ocholi began to show up often. Sometimes he came with fruits, sometimes with a small cash gift for the children. Each time he spoke to Enojo politely as if he only wanted to help his struggling family, but his real eyes were on Maja. Soon, she began to expect him. She would dress neatly before leaving the house, wear small perfume and powder her face. When Enojo asked why she was suddenly dressing like that, she would say, "Can't a woman look good again?" It started slowly, as all dangerous things do. When Achali offered to take her home one evening from the market because of rain, she agreed. That was the first time she sat in a car. The seat was soft, the air smelled nice, and the music made her forget her worries. When she came down at the gates, he gave her 2,000 naira and told her to use everything for herself. She hesitated, but when she saw the new slippers he wore, the gold ring on his finger, and the way people respected him, she smiled and accepted. Enojo asked why she came home late. She lied that she stayed longer in the market because she was helping a friend pack her things, all because of the rain. He didn't argue. He only said, "You did well, my wife." He did not know that his kindness was being buried under her greed. Weeks passed, and Ocholi's visits became normal. Sometimes he met Enojo in the shop. Other times he met only Omaja. The villagers began to notice. One woman even told Omaja quietly, "Be careful, oh. The gods of Ida do not play with adultery." Omaja laughed it off. She said, "I will live my life the way I want it." Not long after, she began sneaking out to meet Ocholi in his village. He rented a small room for her where they met secretly. He bought her a new wrapper, shoes and perfume. Soon, she started wearing better clothes than her husband. When Enojo asked how she got them, she said a friend dashed her. He believed her because in his heart he thought his wife was too innocent to lie. But life was changing right behind his back. One night, while Enojo slept, Omaja lay awake. She remembered the oath they took the day of the cleansing and the voice of the priest saying, "If you betray your husband, the spirit of the land will strike him first." Her heart beat very fast. She turned on her side and tried to pray, but the guilt was too heavy. By morning, she had pushed the thought away. She convinced herself that nothing would happen. After all, she had already gone to Mama Iye, the priestess, to protect her children. She didn't care what happened to Enojo anymore. All she wanted was to live a better life. That week, Ocholi gave her a small phone and told her to keep it a secret. He said, "If you need anything, just flash me." It was her first time owning a phone. She hid it in her box under a pile of wrappers. When Enojo came home that evening, he told her the chief priest had warned about couples who forget their vows. He said a man from the village had just died from Oduife, the swelling cause that happens when a woman cheats and refuses to confess. He laughed and said, "People of today, they don't fear tradition again." Well, na dem sabi o. Omaja forced a smile, but her heart was beating so fast. Her husband didn't know that very soon that same curse would knock on his own door. As the days went by, life in Enojo's house became even harder. There was no money, and the little yam business Omaja managed was not doing well. One day, she sat beside him as he patched an old trouser and said, "My husband, the yam business is not moving in this era anymore. Thank God you can see it by yourself. People here are too familiar with me. They want to buy on credit, and most of them never paid back. I am tired." Enojo looked up worried. "So what do you want to do?" he asked. She replied, um, "I am thinking of selling in the markets. Things move faster there." Enojo talked about it for a while and then he nodded. "That's a good idea, my wife. If that will help us, go ahead." He didn't suspect anything because he trusted her completely, and that was how the lie began. Every day, Omaja would dress up early in the morning and carry her yam as proof that she was truly going to sell. But once she gets to the market, she will arrange her yam in her store, leave it under the care of her good neighbors, and move straight to the next village to be with Ocholi, the rich trader who had promised to take care of her. Whenever she arrived, he would welcome her with food, drink, and excess love. She would spend the whole day there, eating better food than she had ever tasted in her husband's home. When she returned home, she pretended to be tired from the market. She would drop a few naira notes on the table and say, "This is all I made today." Enojo would thank her and pray that God would bless her hands, not knowing that her hands were already unclean. At first, she felt guilty, but each time she remembered Ocholi's words and how gently he spoke to her, her guilt faded. She told herself that she was only trying to survive. After all, Enojo couldn't give her the life she wanted. Whenever her husband asked how business was going, she said, "It is better now, but things are still slow." He smiled and said, "Don't worry, God will help us." But she will mock him in her mind because her heart had already traveled far from home. She didn't know that while she was enjoying comfort in another man's arms, the customs and tradition in their village was still alive, watching and waiting. One morning, Enojo woke up with a strange heaviness in his legs. He tried to stand, but his ankles felt stiff and swollen. He thought it was the long hours of sitting at the sewing machine, so he laughed and said to his wife, "Maybe I worked too hard yesterday." Omaja only nodded without looking at him because she was busy preparing to go to the market. Enojo dipped his leg into warm water and rubbed balm. He felt a little better and went about his day. But on the fourth day, the swelling increased. His slippers no longer fit. His legs looked thick, shiny and painful to touch. He groaned when he tried to walk. By the next week, the swelling had crawled from his feet to his knees. Fear entered his heart. He sat quietly at the shop, unable to concentrate. His customers began to notice his pale face and heavy breathing. Some whispered to each other. Others shook their heads and said, "The spirits are speaking again." Enida. Everyone knew what that meant. When a woman breaks the Oduife, the marital covenant of truth, her husband's body becomes the mouth through which the land speaks. The swelling of the legs was always the first message. That evening, Enojo came home early, sweating and tired. He called his wife. "Omaja, please come and sit with me." She came reluctantly. He held her hands gently and said, "I don't understand this sickness. My legs keeps growing and my stomach feels heavy. Have I offended anyone? Or," his voice broke, "or have you done something I should know about?" She quickly pulled her hand away and said sharply, "What kind of talk is that now? Why are you trying to blame me for everything?" Enojo shook his head weakly. "I am not blaming you, my wife. I just want to hear the truth." Because she didn't even allow him to finish. She hissed and walked away. That night, his legs doubled in size. He could no longer stand. His body shook with pain. When he called her to help him turn on the bed, she pretended to be asleep. By morning, his stomach had started to swell. The sight alone was scary. He looked as if he had swallowed a drum. Neighbors rushed in when they heard him groaning. They gasped when they saw him and began to whisper among themselves. This is not malaria and this is not poison. This is Odwife. An old man in the compound, Baba Onoja, took one look and sighed deeply. He turned to Omaja and said, My daughter, tell us the truth. You know what this sickness means. Omaja's lips trembled. I don't know anything, Baba, she said quickly. The old man shook his head slowly. If you don't speak, your husband will go and the land will not forgive you. But pride had already built a strong wall around her heart. She said nothing. The sickness grew worse. Enojo could not eat, he could not sleep, and he could not even turn on the bed. He gasped for breath like a fish taken out of water. People came from different parts of the village to see him. He became an attraction for tourism. Some brought herbs, others came just to witness the punishments of the gods. That evening, his mother arrived. When she saw her son lying helplessly, she cried aloud. Ah, this is serious, oh. She turned to his wife and said, My God will punish you for doing this to my son. She knelt beside him and prayed for his life, but the air was already heavy with death. Enojo used his last strength. His voice was weak, trembling like dry leaves. Please, Omaja, if you have wronged me, go and tell the truth. Let me rest. I don't want to die. Who will take care of my children? But Omaja only looked away. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Inside her, fear was shouting, but pride kept her quiet. By midnight, Enoja's breathing slowed. He looked at his wife one last time. Tears filled his eyes. Then he whispered softly, Omaja, please, can't you see I am dying? Where is your conscience? When money came, his body was still. The news spread across it like fire. People filled the compound. Women wept. Men shook their heads. The priest came and touched his staff on the ground 3 times. He said, The land has spoken. The husband is gone. People cursed his wife, but she remained unmovable like a rock. After the burial, Omaja was left alone, and for the first time, she realized what she had done, not just to her husband, but to herself. But then it was too late. The gods of Ida do not sleep on broken vows. For a few days, she stayed quiet, but the village was not. Different versions of the story moved about and she heard everything. When she went to fetch water, women stopped talking. Even the little children who once called her Auntie Omaja now looked away. At first, she pretended to be strong. She told herself people would soon forget. She even returned to business as if nothing happened. But at night, when the oil lamp went out, she heard Enojo's sewing machine again, echoing in the dark. She woke up every morning from nightmares of swollen legs and watery eyes. She prayed, she cried, and she even cursed herself, but the house stayed silent. Her lover actually came to see her only once after the funeral. He stood at the door, looking uncomfortable. He said, You must be strong. These things happen. He left some money on the table and hurried away. After that, she never saw him again. People began to avoid her compound completely. When she entered the market, women picked up the basket and shifted. No one wanted to touch her goods. She tried to sell yam again, but her table stayed empty. She could feel the world pushing her aside little by little. Her children suffered as well. At school, other pupils called them children of the cursed woman. They came home crying, but she could not comfort them. Her touch frightened them. One night, her elder son spoke through tears. Mama, they say you killed Papa. Tell us it's not true. She shouted. Shut up, but her voice broke. When the boy ran out, she fell to her knees and sobbed till dawn. From that day, something inside her began to rot. She stopped eating and her eyes sank deep into her face. Even the mirror refused to show her beauty anymore. It showed a stranger, thin, tired and guilty. By the next moon, she noticed her skin changing. Small sores appeared on her arms, leaking clear water that smelled foul. No soap could wash it away. People said the spirit of a Nojo had touched her. Omoja tried to hide inside, but shame followed her like a drumbeat. She thought of going to Ocholi again, but word reached her that he had fallen ill and his condition was worse than hers. Fear gripped her heart. Maybe the same cross had reached him as well, she thought. The next day, she went to her husband's grave. She cried bitterly, asking him to forgive her. But then she felt a great sensation as if someone was flogging her. From that day, her life became something else. Even the dogs barked as if they sensed the smell of death following her. She was alive but already counted among the dead. Days later, Omaja became weaker. Her breathing was slow. Her body was covered in sores that no medicine could heal. The smell of decay filled the room, but she no longer noticed. Her strength was gone. Her pride was gone, and even her tears had dried up. One night, thunder rolled across the sky. The wind blew her door open. She felt as if the river was calling her name firmly. She stood up slowly and began to walk barefoot towards the water. The road was dark and the sand was cold beneath her feet. Her legs shook, but she didn't stop. She reached the river bank. Of course, she didn't know what she was doing. A sudden wind blew from the water, strong enough to bend the trees. The current roared, louder than ever before. Then everything went silent. By morning, her body was found near the river bank. People gathered, but no one touched her at first until the priest had done what he was supposed to do. They dug a shallow grave by the river and covered her quietly without songs and without farewell. No one cried. Even our own children stood at a distance watching in silence. After her burial, her three children were left with nothing. The villagers avoided them, saying that the cost might follow them. They begged from house to house, hungry and barefoot, until one afternoon when a stranger passed through Ida. His name was Mr. Adoga, a trader from another village who had come to buy yam. He saw the children roaming about with their eyes red from crying. He stopped and asked what happened. When he heard the story, he sat down and wept with them. He said, "This is wickedness. A tradition like this is not justice, it is bondage." He took the children with him to Onitsha, clothed them, fed them, and sent them to school. Years later, when the children grew up, they became successful. And when people asked Mr. Adoga why he helped them, he always said, "He who licks the lemon should have his edge affected." He said, "We cannot continue to worship traditions that destroy homes. If a woman sins, let her bear her punishment, but let it not swallow her husband and children as well." The tailor was faithful, yet he paid for the unfaithfulness of his wife. It doesn't make sense. Hey, African Tales by Kamma Tribe, how are you all doing? For me, I am doing just fine. I know most of you are so angry with the weight of this tradition, but let me bust your bubbles. It is still happening, and that's why it is very important to ask questions before getting married. Ask questions, oh, because you see all these traditions. It is real. So many men had journeyed to the other side of life simply because of what you have just heard from this story. And sincerely, it is pathetic. I wonder who made that rule in the first place. Because tell me how a partner will die simply because of the sin of his wife. Just make it make sense. But then, it is what it is. Now I want to hear from you, my dear Kamma tribe. Have you ever heard of customs and traditions like this before? And do you think it can be changed and replaced with understanding and forgiveness? Kindly share your thoughts with me. And please, don't forget to like the story, share it to your loved ones, and subscribe to this channel if you have not already done so. Until I bring the next interesting story your way, it is a goodbye from here, and God bless you.